Welcome to another of our interviews with our wonderful people from the Charity Learning Consortium. We're so excited this year to interview all of our award winners. And of course, they have award-winning stories to share with you here on Learning Now TV. Our first one for 2025 is Liam Maguire. I'll leave Liam to introduce himself in a moment, but what I am particularly excited about is when we hear from our award winners, the joy of being able to share their stories with you means that I can translate those stories into the world of the corporate and you'll be able to pull things out of them. So Liam, do you want to just tell us a little bit about who you are and what does your organisation do?
Thanks, Michelle. My name's Liam Maguire, and I am the volunteering officer at Christian Aid. Christian Aid is an international NGO that focuses on eradicating the scandal of extreme poverty. And within my role, I work in the volunteering team supporting over 8,000 of our wonderful volunteers who support every element of our work.
Excellent. So for our listeners overseas, NGO?
An international aid organisation.
Okay, so those non-governmental organisations that, like you, are working across the globe, not just in one location. And so are you responsible for the UK or for a wider setting?
So fortunately, I'm only responsible for UK volunteers, which is plenty enough to keep me busy.
8,000. Fantastic. So what's the work that caused Charity Learning Consortium to recognise you and give you one of their awards?
So as part of my role within the volunteering team, I look after learning and development for volunteers and volunteer managers. And so that's what brought us into Charity Learning Consortium's sort of orbit, if you like. And through Charity Learning Consortium, I was attending their conferences and supporting some of their other members with sort of how to, I guess, tailor training to a volunteer audience. And they were very kind to recognize me and award me the Community Champion Award.
So the Charity Learning Consortium awarded you the Community Champion Award. And obviously, I'm keen to hear a little bit more about what is it that you do in terms of learning and development and communities?
Sure. So Christian Aid as an organisation, I guess this is true of many charities, is absolutely dependent on our sort of wonderful volunteers in order to amplify our message and help us to raise like essential funds. And so Christian Aid does that in a number of ways. Through community fundraisers is the bulk of our sort of volunteer base. But then within that, we have this core of I guess, more specialized volunteers, for want of a better way of putting it, that require a little bit more extra support. And part of that is they require training, either about their role or compliance or those kind of elements. And so I was very keen to learn from other members of the Charity Learning Consortium about how they're using their platform, what best practices we could take to apply to our volunteers, but also recognizing that volunteers are a slightly different audience in terms of learning and development. So they maybe don't have the same preferences and motivations that maybe like an employed member of an organization or somebody in the corporate sector might have. So they're not necessarily engaging with learning and development to build their skills for a future career, because many of them might already be retired. There's not the same sort of ability to kind of strongly encourage through like management systems and things like that, people to take up training in the same way, because ultimately you're working with volunteers. And so you're having to find more intrinsic motivations. Although I'm sure no organization would want to do this, if you absolutely had to, you could email a member of staff and say, you haven't done your compliance training, you need to complete it.
Yeah,
you can't do that with volunteers.
No. I mean, people who are volunteering are ultimately giving because they choose to give. And when you're asking them to complete learning and development, you're asking them to give even more of themselves. So how have you used sort of the community-based, or how have you actually encouraged people to do the training? Because this is a problem that we have in the corporate space, that, people don't care about learning and development, except if you work in the learning and development team. So how do we give people that intrinsic motivation?
Yeah, I think the most important lesson that we have learned is that you have to connect the training to something that your volunteer also cares about. So you have to work twice as hard to help them see the benefit of investing their time, which with things like safeguarding training or code of conduct can be really, really hard, because especially many people who volunteer often volunteer with other charities as well, and so may have already done very similar training on things like data protection and safeguarding and things like that. And so you have to work really hard to help them see how this training is not just about ticking a corporate box, but is actually about helping them to do their role more effectively, to be more confident, to help keep themselves and others safe. That ultimately you're doing it because you care about them, about the work that they're doing, and you want to see them succeed in that.
And when you've interacted with your community of peers, which you get from the Charity Learning Consortium, how has that helped you personally to grow as well and to be motivated? Because we all, when we work in learning and development, we also need that intrinsic motivation. We all need to be part of something and to grow ourselves. What's helped you there?
I think just learning from other people's experience and expertise. Like, I'll be really honest with you, our journey into learning and development as a team began 3 years ago when we started looking for a learning management system. And that's when my journey into learning and development really started properly as well. Before that, I wasn't doing as much. And so I really recognized that, I don't have all the answers. I don't, sort of 3 years ago, I didn't know what I didn't know. And so being able to be part of a community where I can ask other people to, their advice on questions, where I can view their sort of learning management systems, where I can get an idea of the challenges that they faced and how they've overcome them, has been absolutely essential for me. And just that recognition that often it can feel like you're in your own little sort of charity silo, and to be able to break out of that and sort of say, well, what are you doing that's worked for you? And this is what I've done that's worked for me, has been really, really valuable.
Liam, there's so many connections here that often if you're working in L&D in a corporate space, you might be the only person in L&D, even in a global role, for example. So building your network, as you've shared with us today, both helps your motivation, but also enables you to share with others. I am loving the humility that you have and that you've shared with us, and I appreciate it very much, because you're encouraging us all to connect with each other, and that can only be a good thing. So I'm all for connection, community, building your personal learning network, and I appreciate you be part of ours today here on Learning Now TV. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.